Mr. Secretary, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was saying, the People's Republic of China.
He is a war criminal. The blood of
Secretary of State Antony Blinken was interrupted several times during a Senate Foreign Relations hearing by protests. I'm going to play for you these clips, and I'm also going to give you some context here as to why these are justified. Not even because of the obvious of the Biden administration itself and its ongoing policy and support of Israel's ongoing bombardment and ethnic cleansing of Gaza, but also because of what Antony Blinken himself has said, including recently. So there was some indication that this was going to happen at the beginning of the hearing before Antony Blinken even began to speak, because these individuals were pictured here at the back. As Lauren Gambino tweets out, protesters call Blinken the Secretary of Genocide and a war criminal as he enters his first of four Capitol Hill appearances this week. Capitol Hill appearances this week. This was clear that there were people there that did not agree with Antony Blinken, and they made that known. So let me get to the first clip.
The need for U.S. global leadership and for cooperation with allies and partners has never been greater. The People's Republic of China is pursuing military.
Was 6 years old when Israelis killed her. Raqqa was 6 years old. Blinken, you will be remembered as the butcher of Gaza. You will be remembered for murdering innocent Palestinians.
So this is the first of several protests that happened within an 8-minute span. This one is maybe the most heartbreaking in the sense that there's a specific topic here. The protester yells out, Hind Rajab was 6 years old when Israel killed her. This was, in case you're not familiar, I've covered this before. There were a lot of headlines about this. This was a 6-year-old who was on the phone in Gaza with paramedics waiting for help. The paramedics were given the green light to go in and save her. And then they were all killed by Israeli forces. And that led to when the protests at Columbia were happening, they renamed that building to Hind's Hall. Then Macklemore came out with his song about Gaza called Hind's Hall. So there's been a lot of a large cultural impact because of that. Look, yes, it's one of 40,000 plus civilian deaths in Gaza, but it's one that I think is a microcosm of a larger ongoing perspective that the Israeli government and its allies has towards Palestinian life, where they simply do not matter. There's a larger piece here from the Washington Post that discusses this story as well. Palestinian paramedics said Israel gave them safe passage to save a 6-year-old girl in Gaza. They were all killed. This is Hind Rajab and her family and the paramedics that were killed at the time. So let me get to the next clip.
Mr. Secretary, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was saying, the People's Republic of China.
war criminal. He is a war criminal. The blood of 40,000 people is on his hands. The blood of 40,000 Palestinians is on his hands. He is a war criminal. He is a war criminal. Blinken is a war criminal. The blood of 40,000 people is on his hands.
So I let the clip roll there a bit because I wanted to show you his face as that protester was being carried out. I wonder what he's thinking. Someone like this has to know what he is supporting, yet remains in that position, does not resign, is still doing what he is doing, likely telling himself that it's better I'm here and doing what I can as opposed to someone else coming in here who maybe is even more hawkish than I am. But that would be ridiculous. He is supporting what he is supporting an Israeli government that is doing this. They are sending billions of dollars. They continue to send billions of dollars in weapons and support to an Israeli government committing ethnic cleansing. Making these people feel uncomfortable, I think, is necessary in a democracy. You know, a lot of people have this innate desire towards decorum, you know, don't want to disrupt the peace. And let's be clear, it takes a lot of guts, a lot of confidence to yell out in a crowded hearing like this and call out a war criminal. These people deserve a lot of credit for doing that. Someone like this that is willing to stay in this position, is unwilling to resign, is unwilling to call out what is happening while they have the platform, have the power. You know, just to finish my sentence, they deserve to be protested. Think if, again, going to the mind of this man who there may be nothing in there. He may feel nothing at all, may be a complete sociopath, likely is a complete sociopath. But let's say there is a shred of him that's saying, well, as long as I'm here, I can help to maybe lessen the impact of what is happening in some way. Like they recently put a pause in some of the weapons going to Israel, which is, you know, a handful compared to the thousands of weapons that have already been sent. But let's say there's a part of him that feels that way, that he thinks he's helping in some way. What would help even more is to resign and publicly criticize the position that Joe Biden and the government up until now has had. Now, of course, part of that would him having to concede that he was part of that problem. But that would have a greater impact. If this was someone who actually cared to make a difference, that would have a greater impact. Resigning and putting a spotlight on the problems here would have a greater impact than him staying in this position. Here is the last protest.
The president's FY25 budget.
Funding a genocide in Gaza. There have been 7 mass graves outside of hospitals. This is sick. This is deranged. You are a war criminal. Shame on you.
So I'm going to get to another clip of someone who recently met with Antony Blinken and their experience. First here, you know, something I also appreciate about these protests is that they are being very specific about what they are calling out. You know, it's one thing to just call him a war criminal, which would be fine, but it's another to add on some extra context to why you are saying that, why you think this man's a war criminal. In this case, mentioning the mass graves that have been discovered, which, as the UN reports here, mass graves in Gaza show victims' hands were tied. And these are graves of, you know, women, the elderly, many of them stripped naked, bodies buried deep in the ground, covered in waste. It's just, look, you know, I've done a lot of commentary on over the past 6 months on Gaza, and even I feel like I have just scratched the surface because there are so many examples of war crimes, of just mass dehumanization that it's been impossible for me to even absorb, let alone discuss. But I want to get to, again, specifically as I discussed at the beginning of this video, why criticizing Blinken, apart from the fact that he's Secretary of State, is important here. And what he has done himself, just through his own words, or said himself. Blinken criticized the protesting students' silence on Hamas. It shows you how fundamentally unserious this man is. Why would you criticize your government? Why would you expect students to criticize the US government about Hamas when they're already anti-Hamas? Or if you're thinking, then why aren't they protesting Hamas? What is protesting Hamas going to do? Are they going to be like, oh, the students are protesting us, we must now give all the hostages back, which we already said we would do if there was a ceasefire, and Netanyahu rejected that? It's just so fucking stupid to think this way. It is so fucking stupid. And I shouldn't say it's not stupid. It's disingenuous. Blinken knows this doesn't make any fucking sense. But he's saying this as a way to deflect. You know, part of his statement is, it's, what is it? It's good to see people, demonstrations were a hallmark of American democracy. At the same time, criticize the students for the silence on Hamas. Like, he can't just acknowledge the fact that people are demonstrating, and that is, like, this isn't even anything. Like, this is not even supporting the protests, which of course he wouldn't, because they're against what he is doing. But he can't just sit there and say these demonstrations are, they're important for democracy. He can't even just do that without having to also add some stupid shit on top of it that makes absolutely no sense as a way to undermine the protests. There's also this. Bilal Hamoud and a handful of Arab American leaders met with Antony Blinken Friday. Blinken told him that if Palestine became a state, federal law would mandate the defunding of the UN, which could then defund the World Food Program, causing global starvation. Watch this.
So Antony Blinken said, we have to oppose Palestinian statehood or else the World Food Program budget will be cut and people will starve around the world. Like, that's the Secretary of State's assessment that he's making to you guys in this meeting?
The example was given that if the UN had to cut its funding, it would have to cut programs like the World Food Program. And that was the example shared, followed by the explanation that then the world would have to starve as the Gazans are. And so that is not the comparison you make to make an argument for why Palestinians should not have a free state.
So look, as the Secretary of State, that alone is a solid reason to protest Antony Blinken. But as an individual as well, as this garbage human that he apparently is, saying bullshit like this in private closed-door meetings with Arab Americans, that the rest of the world would have to starve if we recognize the Palestinian state, that is just another reason to protest the man. You know, there was a time at the beginning of this where I really thought Joe Biden was the barrier, as he seems to have, he's very malleable in other ways, but this seems to be a hard line for him where he's just full-on support of Israel with very little criticism. Because at the beginning of this, there was a tweet that Antony Blinken put out that he deleted quickly, where he was essentially implying that he wants to see a ceasefire. So I thought, okay, maybe behind the scenes, he actually is trying to push Biden in the right direction. I no longer think that. When you have closed door meetings like this, saying shit like this, no, there is no, you can't blame somebody else. And Blinken's going to be remembered for the rest of his life as a war criminal, as a man who not only allowed this to happen, but enabled it. And this has not been the first time, just to end on some previous examples. Blinken was also protested. This is from October 31st. Anti-war protesters calling for a ceasefire in Gaza repeatedly interrupted Antony Blinken during a Senate hearing on Tuesday, where the U.S. Secretary of State was pushing for a $106 billion funding package, including $14 billion in military aid for Israel, which they got. This is I'll share this short clip. This is from that protest back in October.
Committee will suspend, and I again ask that those in the audience respect the people in the room and allow us to continue the hearing. The hearing will suspend until the disruption is removed.
Also, since this came out today, I figured I'd bring it into this video. Israeli officials seize AP equipment and take down live shot of northern Gaza. Yeah, this is what an innocent state would do. An innocent country would shut down all media from covering Gaza. The AP of all places. The most just straight up, here is the video of a thing that happened, news organization that you will ever find. And they shut this down. And just Axio's piece on that. not much more to really add to it. But you could tell I'm in good spirits. It's just I wish I don't know. I wish there was something else I could cover, because something happier, something more positive. But as long as this is going on, this is the most important story. There's going to be days where I'm going to want to talk about something else, or something else happens and I could have a little break from the realities of the worst things happening right now in the world. But, it's impossible to not continue having Gaza as a focus as long as Israel, backed by superpowers like the U.S., continue to support this ongoing genocide.